All right, welcome to Bike Social. Today we're going to talk about proper bikes because we don't know what they are, and we keep getting told by people that that's not a proper bike. So we're going to talk about them. And then we'll talk about proper dogs, and we'll talk about proper fridges, because that's important too. I don't want to not have a proper dog.
It's a good point, because I've just been on that C400 X launch. BMW, it's not a maxi scooter, it's a mid-sized sports scooter. And as soon as I started posting stuff, people were saying, oh, you could buy a proper bike for that money. You're like, well, how is it different to decide to buy a scooter or an adventure bike or a sports bike? Obviously they're not comparable, but it's still a powered two-wheeler that gets you around in a more exciting way than a car. This has the advantage of a boot. Its engine's mounted on the swing arm, which is fine. It handles great. It'll do about 85, 86 mile an hour, something like that. It's stated top speed.
Maybe if they put a fuel tank in between, like, the handlebars and the seat, so it had a fuel tank there, then it'd be a proper bike. Would that make it a proper bike?
Right.
If you couldn't step through it, if you take away the ability to step through it, then it might be a proper bike then.
Yeah, it's a girl's bike because you ain't got crossbar.
That's it. So actually, proper bike is not it's man's bike.
But that's not right.
Do you know what?
I'm not saying it's right or wrong. We've just figured it out.
Do you know what the reality? I think the key thing with this, and I think what people miss with this, is they get hung up on the motorcycle, and they should be talking about motorcycling. For me, one of the things I realised in the last few years is that I'm nuts about motorcycling, and actually I don't really give a monkeys about the motorbike in many ways. It's that sensation when you're on a bike that you only get on a bike, that sensation of the mixture of acceleration and speed and the G-force and the cornering and all that stuff and the freedom, that's the bit I love.
Yeah.
And if I'm on, I get that feeling whether I'm on a scooter or a small adventure bike or a big adventure bike or a sports bike, and that's the thing I love. That's the thing that makes me want to travel by motorbike. And actually, it doesn't really matter what kind of bike.
So you'd rather the bike was kind of less of a feature, so you can focus more on just being out on a motorcycle?
Yeah, it's the feeling. It's all about that. One way we were talking about this before, but one of the things for me that differs is when I make a journey in a car, the kind of how much I enjoy that journey, and when I get there, and the whole thing about that journey is governed by the 18 cars in front of me, and whether they decide to go quickly or slowly, or whether they decide to go around that roundabout now or make that junction now. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm completely at their mercy. When I'm on a bike, it's my journey. I'm not affected by any of that. It's just, if I want to go fast, I go fast. If I want to go slow, I go slow. It's just my journey. I set off. I know what time I'm going to get there because I'm on a bike. That's motorcycling.
Yeah.
And we all get hung up on how fast it goes around corners and what the suspension's like and how many electronics it's got and the rest of it. That's just peripheral.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
So one of the things you said there was about being able to overtake stuff. Now you could argue that on like a scooter, overtaking is a little bit harder than on a Fireblade or a 1290 Super Adventure or something like that. So is that what a proper bike is? It's something that's fast enough to overtake everything?
Yes, maybe, but I think it depends on the rider. It depends on where you're riding. Everything's got its advantages. Most bikes that are bigger than 200cc can out-accelerate pretty much anything from traffic lights. If you're in traffic, most bikes can make the advantage of their kind of physical size work for them. Everything's got certain advantages. You could argue that an adventure bike is an awful lot more difficult to filter on than a scooter. When you win the race on the adventure bike out of town, as soon as you get to the first small town, scooter catches up.
Yeah. Well, you're young. So. What do you reckon? Are we?
I don't know. I just think some people are so hung up on their type of bike that they ride. So you've got the sports bike enthusiasts who will, they'll be sick in their mouth if they look at a bike, think about buying a bike that hasn't got a fairing on it and stuff like that. And they're the kind of idiots that just say that that's not a proper bike. This isn't a proper bike. That's a proper bike. They're all bikes at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Get on them and ride them. I had my first experience of riding another bike that divides opinion. I'd never ridden one of the big capacity sort of Harley cruiser things, and I had to go on the street glide, and it was incredible.
Yeah.
Like,
why was it incredible? What made it incredible?
It was the slowest, comfiest, coolest motorcycle I've ever ridden.
What makes it cool?
It's just, look at it, batwing fairing, it's gloss black, bags on the back, big front wheel, it's like 2 litres of no power whatsoever, but shed loads of torque. Yeah. Cruising down the road from Uppingham to Market Harborough, I had All Saints on the stereo, up full blast, visor up, I was looking cool as anything up until I got a blue bottle in my eye. But yeah, it was just the coolest bike I've ridden.
But surely, according to the cliches, the minute you got to the first corner, you went straight on because you couldn't stop and it doesn't handle, and there was a big batwing shaped hole in the head, and you had to.
No.
Sure, that's happens at every corner.
You can crank that thing into a corner really quick, and it just holds and it just goes, and you can overtake on it. It's only got 80 brake horsepower, but it's got about 1 million torque. I know it weighs the same as a small church, but you can get around stuff pretty quick on it. So I really enjoyed it. I was sad to give it back and then get back on the fat bob again.
So you're telling me that all those people on social media that haven't ridden one
the internet
are wrong.
is wrong. The internet, you are wrong.
You mentioned the fat bob, and I had to go on that, and I was just like, that is awesome, because it is the talk, isn't it? And that's why I think people get hung up on power and they get hung up on spec. And I should say I was playing devil's advocate with the proper bike thing, because I just think if you're choosing a bike, and we often get this, don't you? People saying, which first bike I'm going to buy on the Bike Social Test Team Facebook page. Bloke was asking about what bike he should get next. You're like, find the one you like the look of, but read reviews just to check it's not shit at the things you want it to do that's really important. Yeah. So if you're going to be going across autobahns every day and you want something really fast, don't buy something that has top speed of 85 miles. Yeah, don't buy Grom. If you want, it totally depends on what you want to do. And as long as a bike doesn't suck at what you want it to do, then buy it because you love the look of it, surely. But you're talking about the Harley. I was on my favourite Harley is the 48 and the new 48 Custom. That's always, if I had a Harley, that's the one I'd have. But so many people just say, Harley's is shit, I don't like Harleys. A Harley isn't one bike. There's a whole load of different bikes, but because they're so, the engine is such a focal point of that type of bike, if you just look at the engine, you think they're all the same. Even though the engines aren't all the same. No. But they don't all look the same. Now, I pulled up this, it's a Harley-sponsored ad post from Facebook, and thought we could address some of the... So one hilarious commentator says, go to John Deere if you want to test drive a tractor, lol.
They're not tractors. You couldn't even go off-road on them. I mean, that's the stupidest comment. That, like, they've got about 3.5 inches of ground clearance, so it's clearly not going to go off-road, mate. Should we name his shame?
No, because they all said that anyway. A million people.
It is just...
Yeah. I'd rather walk than ride a Harley. Hate them.
Well, walk then. don't buy a Harley. Don't ride a Harley. If you don't like that bike, don't ride it. It's like saying to somebody, do you like really hot spicy curry? They're like, no. Go and try some of that Joel Fraser. You'll really like it. You won't like it. You'll hate it.
Yeah, but why try and tell? It's like religion, isn't it? I don't mind.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, probably shouldn't get into this. Anyway, just a bit is, religion's fine. Whatever religion you want to do, just...
accept.
No, not at all. Just don't try and force me into something.
Yeah.
It's like anything, isn't it? Surely if... We all pretty well like old bikes, don't we?
Yeah.
But we wouldn't make somebody ride something else. Just don't try and tell me that your type of bike's better than...
John's gone squeaky. His voice has gone squeaky. Sorry if you didn't pick that up. We'll put a subtitle at the bottom for that.
I think that it's just a really interesting thing with Harley, because the other thing with Harleys, and we talk a lot about them now, is people judge them in the way that they were talked about 20 or 30 years ago. And if there were an annual award in motorcycling for most improved motorcycle manufacturer, Harley would have won it every year for the last 10 years, because their bikes get better and better and better without looking any different. Yeah. And the thing, I was a fairly
without making any more power.
Yeah. Well, that's not true. I think I'm a fairly recent convert, because I had those opinions about Harleys until about 15 years ago, and then I did a long trip on a Harley and loved it, and that was about the time that Harley started getting good, and a couple of years after that I had one as a long-term test bike and loved it, and nearly bought that at the end of the thing, and the guy from Harley said, don't buy this one because next year ones are even better. They've improved their handling, they've improved the kind of just the way the engine fueled and everything, and they just get better and better and better every year. And then now, okay, you can still say the handling on our long-term fat bob that we've got is probably now as good as an early 80s Japanese superbike on modern radiators, which is true. It's not you won't win any races on it. And when I had my long-term street glide, I took it around Alton Park. We were doing a track day, and I think I managed to lap in about 2.5 minutes or something around Alton Park, which was a minute longer than than the kind of the lap record. But my view on that was actually, the HRC development team developing Leon Haslam's Fireblade at that time. Surely, the minimum requirement when they were given that Fireblade to develop was it must be able to go around Alton Park more than a minute faster than some fat bloke on a street glide.
But I bet you were the coolest looking dude at the track.
I was, and I didn't scrape the foot pegs, because that was sort of the other challenge I wanted to try and.
You have a think about that, don't you? Because journos always scrape the boards off.
Yeah, why would you destroy a test bike and then go back and say that's rubbish? It's got no ground clearance. Of course, it's got no ground clearance. It's not meant to have ground clearance.
It's not a tractor.
Yeah, don't tell me it's got no ground clearance.
If you had ground clearance, you wouldn't ride a Harley like that, would you?
No.
You'd ride it like that.
No.
That wouldn't be comfy and laid back and cool.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be easy rider.
And it's all about, I think, and this comes around for me to this other thing about we are so focused as motorcyclists on cornering, and our whole kind of measure about a good motorcyclist, does it go around corners well? And yes, going around corners is an important part of motorcycling. It's a lot of the reason why we do it. But most of the roads that we ride on are a tiny percentage corners and a large percentage straights. And so if you only buy a bike because it's good at going around a corner, you're going to spend 90% of your time riding thinking, well, this is rubbish. When's the next corner coming? And even a racetrack, so Donington Park, 2.5 miles long, 4 kilometres, so 4,000 metres of Donington Park. It's got 10 corners. Each corner's probably, 100 metres long. So that's so that's 1,000 metres in total of Donington Park. Out of the 4,000 metres is corners. So a racetrack, and 3/4 of it's still straight. And so why are we so obsessed? Why do we say let's buy a bike that's really good at doing all sorts of things that I really enjoy riding a straight line too? Because then it's about acceleration, it's about braking, it's about just kind of all those sensations. And bear in mind, most of us can't even ride around a corner properly anyway.
The acceleration thing, for me, I always, especially now I'm a bit older, I tend to back right off at junctions just in case something happens. But then I love the acceleration there away. And there I guess people will argue, well, get something that accelerates more then. But I find even that like 310 BMW, it accelerates on twisty back roads. It's awesome. And when we had that Fireblade, I'm sure I've said this before, when we had that Fireblade, I couldn't enjoy it because I couldn't go fast enough on the road for it to get exciting. Whereas something that you're ragging or something that you feel like if you want to, you can not get it out of shape, but you're working it.
It's nicer sometimes to be riding a smaller bike that you can get to like 90% of, rather than a fast bike that you can only ride to 75%, just because of talent, skill, ability.
But the Harley thing, the Harley thing, surely that's all about completely changing your mindset, and that's what I loved on that 48. Is you just sit there and go, today I'm just gonna chill out and have a really cool, just enjoy ride this. And I think there's the thing is, if you're somebody who as to is commuting a lot, or using it through your year, so you want to keep it clean, a Harley probably isn't for you, because it's if I could afford a Harley, it would be my second bike. It'd be more of my toy bike, but that doesn't make it wrong, does it?
I think there's a time and a place for it as well, because after I'd ridden the Fat Bob back here, after dropping off the street glide and swapping our bikes.
And this is after pulling out of all the hedges that you went through.
All the hedges that I crashed. Because at least a million times. I got back here to the office and somebody had mislaid the key for the lockup, so I was like in a tears, and then had to get the Ducati Multistrada that I've got out of the lockup and then ride it back to Coventry, and I was like running late for dinner was on the table. I was so happy to get back on the Multistrada and then just hammer it home, because I couldn't have got home in the hour and a bit that I did on the Multistrada if I'd have been on the Harley, because it simply isn't quick enough at getting up to speed and stopping and cutting through the traffic. So if you haven't got to be anywhere in it, if you're not under the cosh, you're not in a hurry, then take a Harley.
But does that doesn't make it a rubbish bike? It doesn't make it a proper bike?
No, not all. That's not what I'm saying. It's just a time and place for it.
It's like a holiday.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, and it is that thing about we're obsessed with the whole sport thing, and it's I don't know if it's a macho thing or whatever. You know, you see it in the whole marketing world, don't you? You look at every crap car out there. If you know, if a Korean car manufacturer has got a whole bunch of cars in a warehouse they need to get rid of, they put a sport badge on the back of it, and they think, and that's a sport edition.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any difference. We don't have to be obsessed with sport. I'm not very good at sport. I never was very good at sport. I don't particularly like sport. I'd rather have the comfort model. It's like, you know, if we
you understand underselling yourself because I've tried to keep up with you.
Yeah, but if we applied the same logic to dogs, we'd all have greyhounds, wouldn't we? You know.
Yeah, and they're rubbish dogs, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, no,
Can't really cuddle a greyhound. They're not cuddly, are they?
Yeah, they're nice
That's
dogs.
not a proper. It's not a proper dog, though, is it?
But what I'm saying, you know, it's acceptable for us to have all kinds of dogs. It's acceptable. There's a very, very tough-looking kind of bodybuilding bloke near where I live who walks a very small dog. Maybe he didn't choose it, I don't know, but you know, he walks a very small dog that you wouldn't expect it, and he seems to love it and he gets on with it.
Yeah.
And when it comes to bikes, no. It's got to be the biggest, fastest, sportiest.
This is exactly what the guy in the who went to the Ron Haslam race school the other day for a session, and we did that whole session, and we were like knee down on CBR 600s and flying around the track, properly going quick. And then you pull in and you look at the tyres on the bike, and they're a sports touring tyre, not even a sports bike tyre.
Yeah.
And you think, okay, so why do we need? Because I've got Michelin Road Smart, Sport Smart, something's on my Ducati, which like super sticky 3 compound. That bike's only got 54 brake horsepower. You can put the tyres off my old Rally Grifter on it and it'll probably still go around the corner. Right? You get hung up on like, super sticky rubber, this will work. I'm never going to get it up to temperature. It's probably going to be slippier than a sports touring.
So that's exactly the point with those tyres, because my first bike was a CBR 600, and just under a year after having it, I swung it across a roundabout and snapped the forks in half. And
was it a Harley?
No. It was
Honda, sorry. Yeah.
CBR 6, yeah. But it was my fault, but I was obsessed about having the stickiest tyres. But now I look at it, and the most recent time I did it was a few years ago. I got when I had a Monster S4R, and I put Pirelli Rosso Corsas on it, and they just wouldn't get up to temperature. You know, I'd pull away, they would, but you'd have to work it a bit. And I remember pulling away from somewhere, it just spun up. So I don't get these hot enough, and it's so appropriate stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, I never think about tyres.
Well, tyres are so good now, aren't they?
Yeah, I think there is that. The only time I thought about it was last year. I had an R1200 RS on long-term test, and after 4,000 miles, the handling went off, and I couldn't work out why I was handling so badly because there was so much tread left on the tyres, and it had Pirelli Angel GTs, I think, on it. Yeah. And every time I looked at it, there were loads of tread on them. They were only, and that was after 4,000 miles. But when I looked closely, I worked out they were actually quite badly squared off. Right. So in a way, you're thinking, well, here's a tyre that will clearly do a lot more miles before it's illegal than this. But I actually changed them when they were only half warm because the handling on that particular bike, maybe on certain bikes they don't affect it as badly. BMW is quite long; it's got a long wheelbase, but it got to the point where it was just really horrible riding it, and I thought there was all sorts of things wrong with it, and I got all sorts of theories about the BMW and the not having telelever suspension and all this kind of, and then I put some new tyres on it. It's brilliant.
So what's a proper tyre? Because if you want big knobblies, they'll be rubbish on the road, but they're great off-road, so it's
a sports tyre, obviously.
Yeah,
the sportiest tyre you can get. It's obviously the best tyre.
So have we put it to rights?
Well, no, because I'm sure the reason Ron Haslam uses sports touring tyres on his CBR 600s is because if he used sports tyres, it would probably cost him twice as much in tyres every year.
They did say that, and also the other thing is that they have to perform in because they still go out in the rain. And if you're going out on a sports dedicated sports tyre in the rain, they're not going to get hot, and then you end up doing a millbank and crashing. Yeah. So
it's a long time ago.
Never
but also, they're, especially in a school situation, they're building up, aren't they? So a lot of the time they're going to be used quite gently. And they don't want somebody they're going, okay, push a bit harder, and it's effectively a cold tyre.
They have got quite a nice profile to them as well.
Do you remember when tyres, you used to get tyres that were like a triangle?
Yeah. That was weird, wasn't it? What happened to those?
Well, they realised they were really annoying. They were sharper steering, weren't they? But then I think the geometry of bikes evolved.
Yeah.
you're more technical than me.
Yeah. But no. The other interesting thing with this is that as we all get older, or as I get older, you two are still not old, but as I get older, all the people I know around biking are getting more nostalgic and more interested in spending huge amounts of time and money in some cases on bikes that mean something to them that were from the 70s, 80s or whatever. And in many cases, those bikes are bikes that were their first bikes or first big bikes or that kind of thing. And in many cases, those bikes are old 250s. And I recently did something on RGV 250s, and we sort of looked at those real classic RGV, the VJ22 one, the one with the banana swinging arm, beautiful thing. Now selling for £5,000-6,000 on seemingly on a regular basis, and the last time I rode one of those, I remember coming away from it just thinking, what an absolutely horrible, slow motorcycle. Because the other thing we don't realise when we talk about all this proper bike, sporty bike, blah, 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 is that how quickly things have moved on. That bike in its day, 25 years ago, made 60 horsepower, went round corners like nothing else we'd experienced. Now, a Honda CB500 probably goes faster and goes around corners better, and certainly something like an MT-07 would just annihilate it.
Yeah.
And so from a performance point of view, we talk about if you were to turn up at a bike meet on an MT-07, everybody there would probably just go, "Oh, that's a nice bike. Have you just passed your test? These are nice first bikes."
I hate that. That's a good first bike.
Yeah, if you were to turn up on a VJ22, RGV, the whole bike meet would crowd around your bike, and you would be king of the bike meet for a night, despite the fact that it's a unreliable, hopeless, it's overpriced piece of.
You said about unreliable. Somebody had put on that Harley post, well, you spend all your time waiting for it to break down. You're like, what unreliable are they? Yeah,
they are now. Again, it's just a cliche, isn't it?
Well, it's like the cliche of Ducatis and any brand that was like, oh well, they're just electrical problems or this. You're like, really?
Well, yeah, a long time ago, maybe.
My neighbour actually said, I had the bike out. He's like, oh, you can't work on it anymore, can you? Because it's all electronics. So, well, you kind of can, because it's still an engine with moving parts in it, and you do the same basic maintenance. But then there's some things, that you can't work on. And he was saying, I used to spend, I used to work on mine all the time, and it's broken down at the side of the road. You're like, well, yeah, but they don't really tend to break down now, so you don't need to be working on it at the side of the road. So, what's the problem with them being?
Sounds like somebody didn't fix it properly.
Yeah. And the other thing is that none of us, again, I'm speaking for my generation, I think none of us know how to fix things properly anyway, because we all grew up. I thought this was just me for a long while, and then I realised it wasn't. We all did the same thing. We passed our test. We bought, instead of buying the sensible bike we should have bought, we went out and bought the biggest bike we could possibly afford, which was probably a completely knackered version of that bike. And then when that bike kept breaking and we got fed up with it, we went out and bought the next biggest version. And so we had this succession of absolute shit heaps that were just knackered, and we had no money to fix them. Yeah. So we just had to learn to bodge them. So we spent the first 10 years of our riding lives learning how to bodge things really, really badly. Yeah. And then we got to a point where we could sort of afford new bikes, and then when we got new bikes we could sort of afford to get them dealer serviced. So we never learned to fix things properly, and now we're all in our 50s and we're buying old RGVs to restore. The only thing we can remember about bike mechanics is bodging. So
but now you're really good at it.
Yeah, but now we can bodge it with an expensive toolkit rather than a cheap toolkit. And actually, you read the magazines about kind of modern classics and classic bikes, and you see a lot of the joy in the stories of those bikes is people like me who are now learning how to do these things properly. And actually, that's it's that learning and that new skill that is a lot of the pleasure for people at restoring, almost as much as or more than the riding bit when the bike's finished.
And that, I think, probably is a good kind of summary point, isn't it? That bike is the proper bike for a person who wants that experience, who wants to enjoy something like that. And that bike is no more appropriate to somebody who commutes every day than a fully chrome massive Harley. It's you can do anything on any bike and ride anywhere on any bike, can't you? Yeah. Some will be better at certain situations than others. Yeah. Just choose your situation.
Yeah, and as a real eye-opener for me was when I was in the last job I had. One of the magazines I was involved with was Scootering magazine, which is a magazine for blokes who are now in their 50s, who grew up in the late 70s and 80s riding, what they call, 1950s Italian shopping bikes. And a 1950s, 60s Lambretta makes 7-8 horsepower at the most. They now spend fortunes on tuning these bikes and rebuilding these bikes. There are specialists who are getting 20, 30, 40, even 50 horsepower out of an old Lambretta engine. And they're not proper bikes according to all of this. They're just some old hairdryer thing.
Yeah.
But these guys, you wouldn't mess with them because you just wouldn't. But they love it. They're not interested in. They spend 12, 13, 14, 20,000 pounds on these things. They could afford to buy a Harley. They could afford to buy an R1. They could afford to buy any proper bike. Yeah. And and they have these things, and they spend 10 weekends a year riding them hundreds of miles to go and get drunk in a field near some beach. And they love it, and and that's their proper bike.
Yeah. So I reckon we've kind of nailed it.
Yeah.
You happy, Jared? Happy, Steve? So tell us what your proper bike is. Tell us in the comments down there, and we'll see you next time.